The treaty was already on the table when they led us into the room, and the pen was already lying across the signature line, angled toward the empty chair where Envoy Halloran was meant to sit. I came in 2 steps behind her the way a deputy does, carrying nothing but a slate I did not intend to open. The cartel had arranged the chamber so that we would see the document first and the faces second. That was deliberate. The Provisioning League of the Inner Reach did everything by sequence, and the sequence here was meant to teach us our place before anyone said a word. The room was a trade floor dressed up as a senate. The cartel did not pretend to be a government. It pretended to be a market, which was worse, because a market never has to explain itself. Tiered galleries climbed the curved walls, and in each gallery sat the factors and the holders and the lien keepers, their ledgers open in front of them as small panes of cold light. Above us the dome was glass, real glass, polished to a shine that threw the daylight down in a hard column onto the table where the treaty waited. They wanted that column on the page. They wanted us to read every line in full sun. "Sit," said the Speaker of Accounts. His name was Orvu Selcast, and he was the closest thing the League had to a sovereign, which is to say he held the most paper. He was tall, narrow through the shoulders, with the pale mottled hide of his kind drawn tight over a long skull, and 3 slim fingers on each hand that he kept folded around a tally stick, the way a man keeps his hand on a weapon. His eyes were set wide and low, the color of wet slate, and they did not move when he spoke. They had already decided what they would see. Wren sat. I stood at her shoulder. "Your principal will sit as well," Selcast said, not looking at me. "My principal is standing," Wren said. "He prefers it." That was the first time the room registered anything. A small ripple ran along the nearest gallery, ledgers tilting as the factors leaned to confer. They had expected the deputy to be furniture. A standing deputy was an irregularity, and the League hated irregularities the way a clean ledger hates a smudge. Selcas let it pass. He had bigger business. "You have read the instrument," he said. It was not a question. "The terms are favorable to a young economy. The League is generous to those who acknowledge the League." "We have read it," Wren said. "I had read it 3 times on the crossing in, and I will tell you what it was, because the document is the whole of this story, and everything that came after grew out of what was printed on that page in the hard daylight. It was a treaty of provisioning. On its surface, it bound Earth into the League supply network as a junior member, granted us standing in the markets of the Inner Reach, opened the relay lanes to our freighters, and promised the protection of the cartel's chartered escorts along the dark stretches where independence got robbed. That was the surface, and the surface was written in warm, courteous clauses, the kind of language a man uses when he is about to take everything you have and wants you, grateful for it. Underneath the courtesy, the instrument did 4 things. It set the price of every commodity Earth produced at a fixed ratio against the League's own scrip, and it set that ratio in the League's favor by a margin that would beggar us inside a generation. It granted the League first refusal on every drive core, every alloy, every grain of refined ore that left our system at the fixed price before any other buyer could bid. It placed our relay lanes under League pilotage, which meant League crews aboard our ships, which meant the League would know the location and cargo of every hull we sent into the dark. And it bound us to the League's adjudication for any dispute, in the League's courts, under the League's law, with no appeal beyond the Speaker of Accounts himself. It was not a treaty. It was a collar with a courteous clasp. "The terms are favorable," Selcast said again, because in his world a thing said twice was a thing made true. Wren folded her hands on the table in front of the document. She was a small woman, gray at the temples, with the flat, steady voice of someone who had spent 30 years saying difficult things to powerful people and had stopped being impressed by either the difficulty or the power. She did not touch the pen. "You've set the pen across the line," she said, "for your convenience. It's a fine pen." "It is the League's pen," Selcast said. "Every member of the Reach has signed with it. 41 charters. 41 names. Would be the 42nd. I watched the galleries when he said that. 41. He spoke the number the way a collector names his pieces, and the factors around the room straightened a fraction at the count, proud of it, each of them a small shareholder in the 41. It told me something I had suspected and now knew. The League did not see a treaty as an agreement between 2 parties. It saw a treaty as an acquisition. 41 peoples had sat where we were sitting, read the courteous clauses, understood the collar underneath, and signed anyway, because the alternative to signing was to be left outside the relay lanes, outside the markets, outside the escorts, alone in the dark with the robbers. That was the lever. That was the whole machine. You signed because the dark was worse. Before the envoy considers the instrument, Selcast said, the League will read the schedule of consequence, so that the choice is understood in full. The League believes in informed consent. He said informed consent the way another man might say mercy. as a thing he was proud to offer and certain you did not deserve. A factor rose in the first gallery. She was older than Cellcast. Hide gone nearly white, and she read from a ledger pane in a dry administrative chant, the way a clerk reads a writ. Upon refusal of the instrument, she read the following provisions take effect at the close of session. 1. The relay lanes of the inner reach are closed to all hulls of the refusing party. 2. The markets of the chartered systems are closed to the goods of the refusing party. 3. The escort charters are withdrawn, and the chartered carriers are released from the obligation to distinguish the refusing party's hulls from unflagged hulls in the dark lanes. She let that last one settle. Released from the obligation to distinguish. It was a beautiful piece of writing. It did not say the League would attack us. It said the League's escorts would simply stop seeing the difference between an Earth freighter and a pirate, and would treat both the same, which in the dark lanes meant boarded, stripped, and left. The League would not raise a hand against us. It would only lower one. 4. The factor read. The standing of the refusing party in all League adjudications is set to that of an unchartered actor, and the refusing party's prior claims, contracts, and registrations within the reach are voided at the close of session. She closed the ledger. This is the schedule of consequence, Cellcast said. The League reads it to every party before signature, so that no party may later claim it did not understand. You understand. We understand, Wren said. Then the Envoy will consider the instrument. She considered it. The chamber settled in to watch her consider it. 400 factors in their galleries with their ledgers open, the daylight pouring down through the glass onto the page, the pen lying across the line, and the schedule of consequence hanging in the air like the smell before rain. I want to tell you what was happening underneath, because Wren's stillness in that moment was not the stillness of a woman deciding. She had decided before we crossed the reach. The stillness was something else, and it took me years to find the word for it. It was the stillness of someone who has already paid for a thing and is waiting, without pleasure, for it to be delivered. She had been an envoy for 30 years. She had signed her name to 40 treaties. She knew what a signature was. A signature is not ink. A signature is the moment a people agrees that a thing said about them is true. Sign the instrument, and Earth agreed that the courteous clauses were fair, that the collar was generosity, that 41 names on a League pen made a 42nd name natural. The League did not need our ore as much as it needed our agreement. The ore it could take with escorts that had stopped seeing us, the agreement only we could give. Speaker, she said, Envoy. You've read the schedule of consequence. The League is thorough. I'd like to be thorough in return. Before the Envoy considers, the Envoy will read one line into the record. Cellcast's wide eyes did not move, but his 3 folded fingers shifted on the tally stick. A small adjustment, the first sign that the sequence he had built was not running the way he had built it. The instrument provides for the Envoy's consideration, he said, not for the Envoy's record. Then strike it from the record after, Wren said. But I'll read it first, a standing deputy. A reading into a record that had no place for readings, 2 small irregularities, and the room had felt both. In the second gallery, a young factor was already paging back through his ledger, looking for the clause that governed what an envoy could and could not do at the table, and not finding it, because the League had never needed such a clause. No one had ever made trouble at the table. You read the schedule of consequence, you understood the dark, and you signed. Wren opened her slate. It was the only time either of us touched a device in that chamber, she read. Earth Registry, Lane Survey of the Inner Reach, current as of 40 days ago. She read a string of coordinates, a long one, the kind of thing that means nothing to a listener and everything to a navigator. Recorded by the survey hull, Margate Low, under independent charter, no League pilot aboard. She closed the slate. That's the line, she said. Strike it if you like. Cellcast did not strike it. He sat very still, his fingers on the tally stick, and I understood that he did not yet know what the line meant, and that not knowing, in a room he had built to know everything first, was a thing he had not felt in a long time. The Envoy will consider the instrument, he said. A third time, and this time the words had less weight than the first, because a thing said 3 times is a thing the speaker no longer trusts. Wren looked at the pen. She did not pick it up. I've considered it, she said. Earth declines. For a moment the chamber did not react at all. That was the strangest part. 400 factors with their ledgers open, and not one of them moved, because the word declines did not exist in their grammar. Parties negotiated. Parties asked for terms. Parties stalled and wept and threatened, and in the end parties signed. No party declined. There was no provision for it. The schedule of consequence was supposed to make declining unthinkable, and for 41 charters it had. Cellcast recovered first, as a man does when he has held the most paper for a long time. The Envoy misunderstands her position, he said. The instrument is not an offer to be declined. It is the terms of Earth's standing in the reach. To decline the instrument is to decline standing. The schedule of consequence is not a threat, it is a description of the dark. I heard the description, Ren said. Closed lanes, closed markets, withdrawn escorts, voided claims, carriers released from the obligation to distinguish our hulls from pirates. She said it flatly, in order, the whole schedule given back to him without heat. I understood every line. Earth declines. Then Earth will be alone in the dark. Earth has always been alone in the dark, Ren said. We came from it. She stood. She had not signed and she had not raised her voice. And she stood the way a person stands at the end of a meeting rather than the start of a fight, gathering nothing because she had brought nothing, and that emptiness, the woman who had carried no instrument of her own, made no counteroffer, asked for no concession, was beginning to frighten the room more than any speech could have. A party that wants something can be managed. A party that wants nothing from you cannot. Sit down, Envoy, Selcast said, and for the first time there was an edge under the courtesy. You have not been dismissed. The session is not closed. The instrument remains on the table. The instrument can remain on the table, Ren said. We won't be remaining with it. She turned. I turned with her. And that was the moment, I think, when the cartel first understood that something had gone wrong with its sequence. Because the doors were behind us, the great trade doors of the chamber, and Selcast had not opened them. In 41 charters, no party had ever risen and walked toward those doors before signing. The doors were meant to open after the pen was set down, after the 42nd name was added to the 41, as a member is welcomed into the reach. The doors opening before signature had no meaning in the League's grammar, and so the doors did not open. We walked toward them anyway. Envoy Ren. Selcast was on his feet now, his narrow frame unfolding, the tally stick gripped in 3 white-knuckled fingers. If you pass those doors, you pass them as an unchartered actor. Your registration's void at the close of this session. Your lanes close. Your markets close. There will be no second instrument. The League does not offer twice. You will have thrown a world's future into the dark for a gesture. Ren stopped. She did not turn all the way around. She turned her head just enough. A gesture, she said. Yes, I suppose it is. Strike the line I read from the record speaker, then go and find out what it was. She walked. I walked. And behind us 400 factors watched a thing they had no claws for, and the doors stayed shut because no one in that chamber had ever been told what to do when a party simply left. I should tell you who I was, since I am the one telling this, and since what came after ran partly through my hands. My name is Thomas Varel. I was Ren's deputy of provisioning, which is a dull title that means I was the one who knew where every Earth hull was, what it carried, who had built it, and who on paper owned it. The League thought I was furniture, because deputies of provisioning usually are. They carry the ledgers and total the columns and let the envoy do the talking. But Earth had not sent me to total columns. Earth had sent me because I had spent 6 years building the line Ren read into the record, and because when the doors finally opened, I was the one who would know what came through them. We did not run for the doors. We walked, and the walk was long, longer than it had any right to be, because the chamber was vast and built to make a party feel small on the way to the pen. Ren used that. She made the League watch us cross the whole of it, past the first gallery where the white-hided factor still held her closed ledger, past the second where the young factor was still paging for a clause that did not exist, past the column of daylight and the table and the pen lying untouched across the line. She walked at the pace of a woman with nowhere to be, and every step she did not take toward the table was a step the League could not account for. A factor in the third gallery called down, "She bluffs. No world refuses the reach. She'll be at the relay station inside a day, begging to sign." "Then we lose nothing by letting her go," another answered. "We lose the time," a third said, and that one was older, and that one was watching me instead of Ren, and I marked him, because he was the first in the chamber to wonder about the deputy who carried no ledger. Selcast had not moved from his place. He stood with the tally stick in his fist and watched us cross his market, and when we reached the doors he spoke one last time, and his voice carried the length of the chamber the way a man's voice carries when he is making sure the record hears him, and not us. "Let it be entered," he said, "that the envoy of Earth was offered the standing of the reach, was read the schedule of consequence in full, and refused. Let it be entered that whatever follows, Earth chose the dark. The League's hands are clean." The doors opened. They opened because Selcast had finally given the order, and he had given it because the alternative was to have us standing at his shut doors like prisoners, and a prisoner is a party the League is responsible for, and the League wanted no responsibility for us. He opened the doors to be rid of us. He thought he was casting us out. In the League's grammar, that was the worst thing he could do, and he did it gladly, and I have thought many times since that the whole of what followed turned on the fact that he opened those doors believing he was punishing us by it. Daylight came through the opening doors, real daylight, hard and white off the landing apron beyond, and for an instant, it washed the chamber paler than the dome had. We walked out of the League's market into the sun, and the doors stayed open behind us, and 400 factors sat in the suddenly brighter room with the daylight on their faces and the pen still lying across the line, untouched, in the column of light. We did not speak until we were aboard the cutter, and the cutter was 3 hours out from the Reach, climbing toward the relay station where our long hauler waited. "You read it into the record," I said. "I read it into the record. He'll have someone run the coordinates." "I'm counting on it," Wren said. She was looking out the port at the receding glitter of the Reach. 100 chartered stations strung along the lanes like beads on a wire, lit and busy and certain of themselves. "How long, Tomas?" "Your honest number." I gave her my honest number. 3 days for them to understand what the line is. A week for them to believe it. Longer to admit it, and they'll never admit it out loud. They'll cast least of all. "And the lanes?" "The lanes are the part I can't give you to the day," I said, "but it's begun." It began the moment he read the schedule of consequence into the record. He told the room that whatever follows, Earth chose it. He's wrong about that. But he told 400 witnesses that the League's hands are clean, which means when the lanes change, he'll have to explain why his clean hands didn't see it coming. Wren was quiet for a while. The relief when it came did not look like relief. It looked like fatigue. She had not won anything in that chamber. She had only declined to lose. And declining to lose is the most exhausting thing a person can do in a room built to make losing feel like winning. 41 charters, she said. 41 peoples sat where we sat and read what we read and signed. I keep thinking about them, Tomas. Not the League. The 41. Every one of them understood the collar and decided the dark was worse, and they were right to. The dark is worse. We're only telling them a different thing about the dark. "What thing? That you can survive in it long enough to build your own light," she said. "If you start early. If you're patient. If you spend 6 years putting your hand on the thing they think they own, before they ever set the pen across the line." She closed her eyes. "Tell me the line is real, Tomas. Tell me I didn't just throw a world into the dark for a gesture." "It's real," I said. "I built it. It's real." She nodded and slept, and I sat with the ledger she had not let me open in the chamber. And I went through the columns one more time because the line was real, but a real line is only as good as the day it comes due, and the day was coming. The line was this. I will tell it to you plainly, the way I wish someone had told it to the League before they read us the schedule of consequence. The inner Reach ran on its relay lanes. Every charter, every market, every escort depended on them. A relay lane is not a road. It is a corridor of beacons, hundreds of them strung across the dark, each one a navigation marker and a comm repeater and a transitol gate all at once. A hull entering the lane pings the first beacon, the beacon hands it to the second to the third, all the way across the Reach. Without the beacons, the lanes are just dark, and the dark is full of robbers, and the League's whole power was that it owned the beacons, and therefore owned the only safe way through. Except the League did not build the beacons. The League had not built anything in 300 years. The League bought and chartered and adjudicated and held paper, and somewhere along the way, it had stopped being a builder and become a holder of other people's building. The beacons of the inner Reach had been built, lane by lane over 2 centuries, by a long succession of independent contractors who took the work because the League paid late and paid little, and no chartered firm wanted it. 6 years before Wren sat at that table, Earth had quietly become the last of those contractors. We did not buy the League's beacons. You cannot buy what someone refuses to sell. We did something duller and slower and far harder to see. We bid on the maintenance contracts. The beacons wore out. Solar panels degraded, repeater cores aged, station-keeping thrusters drifted, and someone had to go out into the dark and service them. And that someone had always been independents, and the League had always treated the maintenance contracts as janitor work, beneath a chartered firm's dignity, awarded to the lowest bidder and forgotten. Earth was the lowest bidder. For 6 years, Earth was the lowest bidder on every maintenance contract in the inner Reach, lane after lane, beacon after beacon, and we did the work well and cheaply and on time, and the League's procurement clerks signed off on the awards without ever once asking why a young economy from outside the Reach wanted the dullest, least profitable work in the whole market. They didn't ask because the contracts were beneath their notice. A maintenance contract was a cost line, not an asset. It granted no standing, no vote, no market access. It was the kind of paper a speaker of accounts never read, because it never made anyone money. And so for 6 years, no one in the League read the thing that mattered most. The maintenance contracts gave the holder lawful access to the interior of every beacon. Not ownership, access. The right to open the beacon, service the core, certify the repair, and close it again. And a beacon is a beacon because of its firmware, the navigation handshake, the toll gate, the repeater logic. To service a repeater core, you load the firmware. To certify the repair, you confirm the firmware runs. For 6 years, Earth's maintenance crews had loaded and confirmed the firmware of every beacon they serviced, which by the end was nearly every beacon in the reach, because we were the only ones who would do the work. We did not change the firmware. That would have been noticed. We did something else. With every certified repair, we registered the firmware version, lawfully, in the open, in the League's own maintenance ledger, under an Earth-held survey charter. We documented beacon by beacon, lane by lane in the League's records, that the operating code of the Inner Reaches navigation network was maintained, versioned, and certified by Earth. It was all there, in the open, in coastline paper no speaker ever read. Earth did not own the beacons, Earth maintained them, and in a network, the one who maintains the firmware is the one who can stop it from running. That was the line Wren read into the record. The lane survey, current as of 40 days ago, recorded by an independent hull with no League pilot aboard, listing the coordinates and certified firmware version of every beacon Earth maintained. To Cellcast, it was a string of numbers. To a navigator, it was a map of the Reach's nervous system with Earth's signature on every nerve. I did not expect the League to understand it for 3 days. They understood faster than that because Cellcast, whatever else he was, had not held the most paper for 30 years by being slow. He had someone run the coordinates that same evening, and the someone came back not with an answer but with a question. And the question was the beginning of the end of the League's certainty. I know this because the older factor, the one who had watched me instead of Wren, found us at the relay station 2 days later. We were waiting for our long hauler to finish loading when he came aboard the station's neutral concourse alone, without escort, without ledger, which for a League factor was the equivalent of arriving naked. His name was Pelasson, and he was old enough that his hide had gone fully white and his wide eyes had clouded at the edges, and he held no great paper, but he held something rarer in the League, which was the memory of when the League had built things. "You're the deputy," he said to me, "the one who carried nothing. I'm the one who carried nothing. I have spent 2 days," Austin said, "trying to understand why an envoy would walk out of the only door that leads anywhere. And then I ran the coordinates the speaker ordered run, because the speaker's navigators ran them and went pale and would not say why." He looked at me with his clouded eyes. "I am old. I remember the beacons being built. I read the maintenance ledger because I am the only factor in the Reach who still thinks maintenance is not beneath him. I know what your survey is, Deputy. I know what Earth has been doing in the dark for 6 years." "Then you know more than the speaker?" I said. "The speaker knows now too," Austin said. "He simply cannot say it. To say it is to admit that the League does not own its own lanes. To admit that is to admit that the schedule of consequence he read your envoy was a schedule he cannot enforce. He told 400 factors that if Earth refused, the lanes would close to Earth's hulls." The old factor made a sound I took for a laugh, dry as paper. He did not understand that he was describing a thing only Earth can do. The lanes do not close to Earth. The lanes close when Earth stops maintaining them, and Earth maintains them all. Wren had been listening from the bench by the port. She rose now and came to stand beside me. "You haven't told him," she said. "You've run the coordinates, you've understood, and you haven't told the speaker out loud. Why come to us instead?" Austin was quiet for a moment. Out the port, the lanes glittered. Beacon after beacon, the whole strung wire of the Reach's safety. And somewhere in that glitter was Earth's signature on every light. "Because I want to know what you intend," he said. "You did not change the firmware. You could have. You hold the access to every beacon in the Reach. You could have darkened the lanes the moment your envoy passed those doors, stranded 100 charters, and let the robbers do the rest. You did not. The lanes are still lit. The beacons still hand the hulls across. You walked out, you have the whole network in your hand, and you have done nothing with it." He leaned toward me. "A people who could close the dark on us and chose not to is a people I do not understand. And I have learned, in a long life, that the things I do not understand are the things that decide my fate. So I am asking you, Deputy, what does Earth intend?" I looked at Wren. She gave me the smallest nod, the one that meant, "Tell him as much as is true, and not one word more." "Earth intends to keep the lanes lit," I said. Austin stared. "That's it," I said. "We'll keep maintaining the beacons. We'll keep them running on time as we have for 6 years. We won't darken a single lane, not one. Earth declined the treaty. Earth did not decline the Reach." "Then I do not understand you at all," Austin said. "You hold the only leverage that has ever existed against the League, and you tell me you will keep doing the League's dullest work for nothing in return." "Not for nothing," Wren said. "For the thing the League never offered, and we never asked it for. To be left alone in the light instead of the dark. The speaker read us a schedule that said refuse the collar and we cast you into the dark. We're answering it. We're showing him the dark was always his to lose, not ours. The lanes stay lit, the robbers stay out, the charters keep moving. And every factor in the reach, sooner or later, learns the same thing you've learned, that the safety they pay the league for is maintained by the people the league just cast out. Austin sat down on the bench heavily, the way an old man sits when a thing he has believed his whole life turns out to be hollow. They will not thank you, he said. When they learn it, they will not thank you. They will be afraid of you. I know, Wren said, and the weariness was in her voice again, the fatigue that looked nothing like triumph. We didn't do it to be thanked. We did it so that the next world they set the pen in front of has somewhere to look. Go back, Factor. Tell the speaker whatever you decide to tell him. But tell the Reach this, in your own time, in your own way. The lanes are lit because Earth keeps them lit. Then watch what the Factors do with that once they know. It did not move quickly, and that was the point. Wren had built it to move at the speed of paper. Because paper was the League's own weapon, and a weapon turned slowly is harder to see coming than one swung fast, the speaker did exactly what we expected. He enforced the schedule of consequence. At the close of the session in which we walked out, the order went down the lanes. Earth's hulls were barred from the markets of the chartered systems. Earth's registrations within the Reach were voided, and the chartered carriers were released from the obligation to distinguish Earth freighters from unflagged hulls. It was the full weight of the League's grammar, brought down on us precisely as written, and it accomplished nothing, because Earth had no freighters in the markets of the chartered systems. We had never traded there. We had spent 6 years not selling ore and grain into the Reach, but maintaining the Reach's beacons, and a beacon maintenance hull does not carry cargo a market can bar. The schedule of consequence closed doors we had never walked through. Cellcast brought down his whole apparatus on a people who had quietly arranged to have nothing the apparatus could touch. But the order had a second effect, and this was the one that mattered. To bar Earth's hulls from the lanes, the League had to flag Earth's hulls in the beacon network. And the only hulls Earth ran in the Reach were the maintenance tenders. So the speaker's own order went out to the beacons, a directive to deny lane access to all Earth-flagged hulls, and the beacons, every one of them, received the directive in the firmware that Earth maintained. We did not refuse the directive. That would have been a refusal, and a refusal can be enforced against. Instead, the maintenance tenders logged the directive, certified it, and complied. They withdrew from the lanes. All of them. Every Earth maintenance tender in the inner Reach, lawfully complying with the speaker's order barring Earth hulls from the lanes, came home, and the beacons began to wear out. Not fast. A beacon does not fail the day its keeper stops servicing it. A beacon fails the way an old man fails, a panel here, a thruster there, a repeater core drifting a fraction out of sync until the handshake it passes to the next beacon arrives a half-second late. A lane does not go dark. A lane goes uncertain. The hulls still cross, but the crossings grow ragged, tolls misread. A repeater hands a hull to the wrong successor, and the hull drifts off the marked corridor into the unmarked dark, where the robbers wait. The first one was a grain hauler of the Veth charter, a fat, slow hull running the corward lane that Earth had maintained for 4 years and had withdrawn from 6 weeks before. A station-keeping thruster on the 11th beacon had drifted untended, and the beacon had drifted with it a few hundred kilometers off its certified station, and it handed the grain hauler to a successor that was no longer where the hauler expected it to be. The hauler fell off the corridor. The robbers took it in the dark, stripped it, and left the crew in a lifeboat that the lane's degraded repeaters took 11 days to relay a distress call from. 11 days. On a lane that, while Earth maintained it, had relayed a distress call in 11 minutes. The Veth charter brought a claim before the Speaker of Accounts. They wanted compensation. They wanted to know why the safest lane in the Reach had failed. And Cellcast, who knew exactly why, could not say why, because to say why was to say that the lane had failed because the League had ordered its maintainers off it, and that the League had ordered its maintainers off it because the maintainers were Earth, and that Earth maintained every beacon in the Reach. To answer the Veth claim honestly was to confess that the League's safety had belonged to Earth all along. So he ruled that the failure was an act of dark lane misfortune, that the robbers were the cause, that the charter should have run an escort, and that the League's hands were clean. And the Veth charter paid for its own loss and went away unsatisfied, and the older factors began quietly, in their galleries, to do the thing that the League most feared anyone doing. They began to ask questions about maintenance. Pell Austin fed those questions. He never lied. He did not have to. He simply pointed the curious factors toward the maintenance ledger, the cost line paper no speaker read, and let them find for themselves the long Earth signature on 6 years of certified repairs and the date 6 weeks back, when every Earth certification stopped. A factor who reads that ledger does not need to be told what it means. A factor who holds paper for a living can read a withdrawal as well as I can. The second hull was lost 3 weeks after the first, on the spinward lane. The third, 10 days after that. Each time the pattern was the same: a degraded beacon, a ragged handshake, a hull off the corridor, the robbers in the dark, a distress call that crawled instead of ran. And each time the speaker ruled dark lane misfortune and clean hands, and each time more factors read the maintenance ledger, and each time the question in the galleries grew louder, until it was no longer a question but a fact that everyone knew and no one would say in front of the speaker. I was not in the reach for most of this. I learned it in pieces, from Asun's coded reports and from the Charter's own claim records, which were public, because the League prided itself on the openness of its adjudications. I sat in our station office at the edge of the reach and watched the League's safety unravel exactly as slowly as a network unravels when its keeper stops keeping it, and I felt no pleasure in it. Wren had been right about that too. There is no pleasure in watching hulls fall into the dark, even hulls that sign the collar, even crews that would have barred your own hulls the day before. They had trusted a safety they did not understand. The not understanding was the League's doing, not theirs. Wren would not let us light a single one of those lanes back up. That was the hardest part, and I argued it with her more than once. We could send the tenders back out, I said, the night after the third hull was lost. Quietly. Service the beacons that are about to drift. No one would know. We'd stop the losses, and then the lanes would be safe again, Wren said. And the factors would stop reading the ledger, and the speaker would keep his clean hands. And the next world he sets the pen in front of would sign the collar because the dark is worse. No, Tomas. The lanes have to fail for the factors to understand who kept them lit. That's the whole of it. We're not closing the dark on the reach. The speaker did that, with his own order the day he barred our tenders. We're only declining to fix what he broke. There's a difference, and the difference is the entire reason we walked out instead of signing. We don't act against them. We decline to save them from themselves, and we let them see who was saving them all along. Hulls are being lost. Hulls were always being lost in the dark lanes, she said. Before Earth maintained them, the dark lanes lost hulls every month, and the League ruled clean hands every month, and no one read the maintenance ledger because the maintenance was the League's problem, and the League neglected it. We made the lanes safe for 6 years and asked nothing. Now the lanes are unsafe again, and the only thing that's changed is that the factors are starting to know why. We didn't take the safety away, Tomas. We just stopped being the ones who quietly provided it for free. The losing was always the League's. We only stopped covering for it. She was right, and being right did not make it lighter, and I understood then why the relief on her face had looked like fatigue in the cutter. To win this way was to win at the speed of failing beacons and crawling distress calls and old men reading cost-line ledgers, and the winning did not feel like winning at any point along the way. It felt like standing still while a thing you had built 6 years ago slowly, lawfully came due, and watching the cost of it fall on people who had only ever done what the dark told them to do. There was a stretch in the middle of those 4 months when I thought the whole patient design might come apart, not because the League found an answer, but because someone else in the dark thought they had found an opening. The Reach was not the only power that ran lanes. Spinward of the inner Reach lay the holdings of the Sodal Combine, a smaller cartel hungrier, newer to its paper, that had spent a generation envying the League's charters and waiting for a crack in them. When the League's lanes began to fail and the claims piled up unanswered in the Speaker's court, the Sodal Combine read the failure the way a scavenger reads a limp. They did not yet know about Earth's firmware. They knew only that the League looked weak, and a cartel that smells weakness moves toward it. The Combine's envoy found me, not Wren, me, the deputy, who carried nothing, which told me the Combine had done at least some homework. He came to our station office at the edge of the Reach, a broad, heavy creature of a species I had not dealt with before, his hide banded in dull bronze, his manner all warmth and teeth. "Deputy Verrill," he said, settling his bulk into the chair across my desk without being asked. "The Combine has watched Earth with admiration. You have done to the League what the Combine has wanted to do for 30 years. You have made them bleed in their own ledger." He used the wrong word, bleed, and I did not correct him. The Combine proposes friendship. The Combine's lanes are sound. The Combine's markets are open. The Combine offers Earth true membership, equal standing, none of the League's collar. And in exchange, only this, Earth shares with the Combine the method. How Earth holds the League's lanes. The Combine wishes to learn the trick, so that it may do unto the League's remaining strength what Earth has done to the League's safety. Together, we finish them. I let him finish. Then I told him no, and I told it to him the way Ren had taught me, with the door already in view. Earth doesn't have a method, I said. Earth has 6 years of maintenance contracts and a great deal of patience. There's no trick to sell you. There's only dull work, done honestly, for a long time on machines nobody else would touch. If the Combine wants to hold a cartel's lanes, the Combine can start bidding on maintenance contracts today, and in 6 years the Combine will hold them. That's the whole of it. There's nothing to share but time. The bronze envoy's warmth cooled. You will not move against the League with us. We didn't move against the League at all, I said. We declined a treaty and walked out. And we kept doing the work we'd contracted to do until they ordered us off it, and then we obeyed the order. That's the entire record. Read it. We're not in the business of finishing anyone. We're in the business of keeping lanes lit and signing nothing. And if the Combine moves against the League without you, if the Combine seizes the failing lanes while the League is weak, then the Combine will own a network of beacons it cannot maintain, I said. And in a year, the Combine's lanes will fail exactly as the Leagues are failing, and the Combine will learn what the League is learning, which is that holding paper on a thing is not the same as keeping it lit. We won't help you do to the League what was done to it. But we won't stop you walking into the same dark either. That's your business. Light your own lanes. He left unsatisfied, and I thought that was the end of it. But it was not, because a hungry cartel does not take no for an answer. It takes no for a delay. 3 weeks later, the Sodal Combine made its move against the League, not on the lanes, which it could not hold, but in the markets, undercutting the League's tolls on the spinward charters, peeling away the smaller holders with promises of cheaper passage. For a few weeks, it looked as though the League might be crushed between two pressures at once, its lanes failing on one side, its markets bleeding to the Combine on the other. And here was the thing I had not expected, the thing that taught me the most about what Ren had built. The failing lanes saved the League from the Combine. Not the League's paper, not the Speaker's adjudication, the failing lanes themselves. Because the smaller holders who looked at the Combine's cheaper tolls also looked at the Combine's lanes, and the Combine's lanes, while sound, were short and few, and to reach the markets that mattered a holder still had to cross the inner reach, and the inner reach, failing or not, was still the only road to most of the reach's wealth. A holder could not eat a cheaper toll on a lane that did not go where the holder needed to go. So the Combine's raid stalled, and the Bronze Envoy went home, and the League survived its rival, not by strength but by the simple geography of being the road everyone needed, the road Earth maintained. I wrote it all to Ren, and she read it on the porch where she would later hear Asen's last letter, and she was quiet a long while. They came to you to buy the trick, she said. They came to me to buy the trick, and there's no trick. There's no trick, I said. 6 years in patience. I told him that. He didn't believe me. He thought we'd found a lever and were keeping it secret. He couldn't imagine that the lever was just doing the dull work longer than anyone else was willing to. No one can imagine it, Ren said. That's why it works. The League couldn't imagine it. The Combine couldn't imagine it. A cartel's whole mind is built around the idea that power is a thing you seize and hold, a clause you win, a paper you acquire. The notion that power could be a maintenance contract, that it could accrue, quietly, to whoever is patient enough to keep the lights on while the holders sneer at the work. There's no room for it in their grammar. They'll spend years looking for our secret method, Tomas. And the secret method will be sitting in plain sight in the maintenance ledger, where it has always been, and they still won't see it, because it doesn't look like power to them. It looks like janitor work. She closed her eyes. Let them look. The longer they look for a trick, the longer it takes them to start being patient themselves. And patience is the only thing that would actually beat us, and it's the one thing a cartel cannot make itself do. The losses went on while the Combine schemed and failed, and each loss did its slow work on the galleries. The fourth hull was a passenger packet of the Imeline charter, lost on the hollow lane when a degraded repeater handed it onto a corridor that the robbers had been watching for weeks. The packet carried no ore, no grain, no cargo a market could bar. It carried 240 travelers, factors and their families crossing the reach for the turning of the trade season, and the robbers took the packet whole and ransomed the lot of them back to the Imeline charter at a price that beggared the charter for a year. No one died. That was almost worse. 240 factors and their children came home from 11 days in a robber's hold with the same story told 240 times in 240 galleries. The lane went dark, the beacon handed us wrong, the distress call took a week to crawl out, and every one of them, sooner or later, asked the same question that the Veth charter had asked first. Why did the safest lane in the reach fail? By now the answer was not a secret anyone could keep. It had become the thing the whole reach knew and the speaker alone would not say. Pell Asen told me that the maintenance ledger The cost line paper no factor had read in 200 years was now the most read document in the chamber. Factors who had never in their lives requested a maintenance record were pulling 6 years of Earth's certification and the 4-month gap that followed, and laying the dates of the gap against the dates of the lost hulls, and finding that the two lines ran exactly together, beacon by beacon, failure by failure. You did not need to be told what it meant. The ledger told you itself. A faction began to form in the galleries. Asen called them the readers, after the thing they had done that no factor was supposed to do. They had read the maintenance ledger. They were mostly older holders, factors who remembered dimly that the League had once built the beacons it now merely held, and a scattering of younger ones who had done the arithmetic on the lost hulls and did not like the sum. The readers did not yet say the unsayable thing out loud in front of the speaker, but they began to do something almost as dangerous. They began to vote together. The first reader vote was a small thing, procedural, a motion to require the Speaker's Court to publish the cause of each lost hull claim rather than ruling Dark Lane misfortune in chambers. It failed. Of course it failed. The Speaker still held the most paper, and the holders who depended on the League's charters were not ready to humiliate the body that chartered them. But it failed by a margin that 4 months before would have been unthinkable. 40 galleries voted with the readers. 40 factors stood up. In the chamber Selkas had built to know everything first, and voted to make the League say out loud why its lanes were failing. Selkas read the count and ruled the motion lost and moved to the next business. And his voice did not shake, but Asen, who sat near enough to watch his hands, told me that the speaker's 3 fingers had folded around the tally stick and not let go for the rest of the session. He had held the most paper for 30 years. He could count. 40 galleries today, 60 after the next lost hull, 100 after the one after that. He could see the line of it, running exactly the way the maintenance ledger ran, toward a session not far off when the readers would have the count to compel him to say in open chamber the thing he had spent 4 months refusing to say. That was the real schedule of consequence, and the League had read it to itself, clause by clause, with every hull it let fall into the dark. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to tell this part as though the galleries turned against the League out of justice, and they did not. They turned because they were afraid. A factor who reads the maintenance ledger does not feel outrage at the League's neglect. A factor feels the cold of his own exposure. If the safest lane in the reach can fail because the League sent its keepers away, then no lane is safe, then no charter is sound, then the paper every holder lives on is paper on a thing the League neither built nor maintained nor understood. The readers did not vote for Earth. They voted for their own survival, against a speaker who had bet all their safety on a schedule of consequence he could not enforce. Wren had been right about that too on the cutter 20 years before any of it. They will not thank you. They will be afraid of you. The fear was the engine. The fear was always the engine. We had only turned it around to point where it had always belonged. I sent Wren the count of the first reader vote, 40 galleries, and she read it on the porch and did not smile. It's working, I said. It's working, she agreed. And there's a child somewhere on the Imeline packet who spent 11 days in a robber's hold so that 40 factors would read a ledger. I won't pretend that's nothing, Tomas. It isn't nothing. We didn't lose those hulls. The League lost them the day they ordered our tenders off the lanes. But we could have lit the lanes back up any night, and we chose not to. And the choosing is ours to carry, not theirs. Don't ever tell this story as a clean one. There are no clean ones. There's only the collar, which would have beggared a generation and taught the next world to kneel, and the dark, which cost 11 hulls and taught the reach who keeps the lights on. We chose the cheaper grief. That's the most anyone can say for it. She was right, and I have tried in the telling to keep her caution. It was not clean, but it was cheaper than the collar, and it was the only thing that took the pen's power away. And 20 years on, with the lanes lit and no envoy ever again threatened with a dark that turned out not to be theirs to give, I have made my peace with the arithmetic the way she made hers. The cheaper grief. It is not much to put on a record. It is more than the League ever offered the 41. There was one more thing the League tried in the 3rd month, and it is worth telling because it was the last certainty to fall before the speaker sent his letter. Selcast understood by then that the lanes were failing because Earth had withdrawn its tenders, and he understood that he could not order Earth's tenders back without rescinding his own schedule of consequence in front of the galleries, which he would not do. So he did the thing a holder of paper does when he cannot move his own piece. He tried to buy another. He put out quietly, through a procurement clerk, an emergency contract for lane maintenance open to any chartered firm at 10 times the ordinary rate. He would have someone else light the lanes. He would replace Earth with money, the way the League replaced everything with money. 3 firms took the emergency contract. I watched them take it from our station office with something close to sympathy because I knew what they did not. They sent crews out into the dark to the failing beacons, opened them, and found the thing that no amount of money could fix in a season. The beacons were not broken in a way you repair by showing up. They were drifting, off station, out of sync, their certified firmware aging into versions the rest of the network no longer recognized. And to bring a drifted beacon back into the network, you had to know the certified firmware version the whole lane was built around, and that version existed in exactly one place. The Earth-held survey charter, lawfully registered, openly recorded, and entirely useless to anyone who did not understand that the survey was the map. The three firms had the access. They had the money. They had crews and tenders and 10 times the ordinary rate. What they did not have was 6 years of knowing which version went on which beacon, and so they loaded the wrong firmware, or the right firmware in the wrong order, and the beacons they touched did not come back into sync. Some of them fell further out, because a network is an unforgiving thing, and a beacon brought up on a firmware the lane has moved past is worse than beacon left dark. 2 of the 3 firms gave the contract back inside a month. The third lost a tender to the robbers on a lane it had made more ragged, not less, and gave the contract back the day after. Cellcast had spent 10 times the ordinary rate to make the lanes worse, and the galleries watched him do it because the emergency contract was on the open ledger like everything else, and the readers laid the dates of the failed firms against the dates of the further degraded lanes, and the lesson of it went through the chamber colder than any lost hull had. It was one thing for the factors to know that Earth maintained the lanes. It was another to watch the League prove, with 10 times the money, that no one else could, that the work the League had called janitor work for 200 years was a thing only 6 years of patience could do, and that the patience could not be bought at any rate, because patience is the one commodity a cartel has never learned to hold. That was the certainty that broke the speaker, not the lost hulls. He could rule those misfortune, not the readers' votes. He could still outcount them, barely. But the failed emergency contract was a thing he had done himself, with his own paper, to solve his own problem, and it had failed in front of all of them. And it had failed in a way that proved the League could not replace Earth at any price. After that, the speaker stopped pretending the problem could be solved by anyone but the party he had cast out. The letter on League letterhead, sealed with his own seal, addressed to Envoy Ren by name, came 11 days later. Pell Austin wrote me the night before it was sent. The speaker has understood the last thing, he wrote. He understood the lanes were yours in the first month and would not say it. He understood the readers would have the count soon and could not stop it. But tonight he sat in an empty chamber with the emergency contract ledger open in front of him and the 3 returned contracts beside it, and I watched him read the column of money he spent to learn that your work cannot be bought, and I think it was the money that did it, in the end. He is a holder of paper. He has believed his whole life that anything in the dark can be acquired for the right number. He has just proven to himself, at 10 times the rate, that the one thing keeping his reach alive cannot. There is nothing left for him to hold against you. He will write to your envoy in the morning, and he will use the word mutual, and it will be the hardest word he has ever said on League letterhead. I read that to Wren on the porch the way I read her everything in the end, and she was quiet, and then she said the thing that I have come back to more than any other thing she said in the whole of it. He spent 10 times the rate to replace us, she said, and learned he couldn't, and that's what finally moved him. Not the hulls, not the votes, the money. Of course it was the money. It was always going to be the money, with a body like that. The only argument a cartel finally hears is the one written in its own ledger, in the one column it can't make balance. She opened her eyes and looked out at the dark, beyond the porch, the ordinary planet-side dark, the kind that has no robbers in it. We didn't out-argue them, Tomas. You can't out-argue a body that believes everything has a price. We just did one dull thing for 6 years that turned out not to have one. And then we set the pen down and let them spend everything they had finding out. The summons came 4 months after we walked out. It came on League letterhead, sealed with the speaker's own seal, and it was addressed not to Earth but to Envoy Ren by name, which told us everything about how much had changed. A people the League can dismiss, it addresses as a registry. A people the League fears, it addresses as a person. The letter requested, not ordered, requested, that the Envoy of Earth return to the chamber of the Provisioning League to discuss matters of mutual provisioning interest arising in the lanes of the inner reach. The word mutual was doing more work than any word the League had ever sent us. There was no schedule of consequence appended. There was no instrument enclosed. There was only the request, and beneath the courteous language, the thing the League could not write but could no longer hide. Please come back because we have understood, and we do not know what to do. He'll have prepared a new instrument, I said, reading it over her shoulder. A better one. Junior membership at a fairer ratio. He'll offer you what he should have offered the first time and call it generosity. Probably, Ren said. We won't sign that either. We won't? Thomas. She set the letter down. Think about what signing means now. 4 months ago, to sign was to agree the collar was fair. We refused that. Now the speaker will offer a fair treaty, and to sign that is to agree to something worse, that Earth's standing in the reach is a thing the League grants. It isn't. It never was. Earth's standing in the reach is 6 years of certified firmware on every beacon in the lanes. The League can't grant us what we already hold, and the moment we sign an instrument that says they can, we hand it back to them. No, we go. We listen. And we decline again in better light this time. We crossed the reach a second time, and the crossing was different, because this time our maintenance tenders had been gone for 4 months and the lanes showed it. Twice on the way in, our cutter's navigator flagged a beacon handshake, arriving ragged, a half-second late, the firmware drifting out of the version Earth had certified, and no one had recertified since. Ren watched the navigator's panel and said nothing, but I saw her note each ragged handshake the way a doctor notes a patient's labored breath. The chamber, when they let us into it, was the same and not the same. The tiered galleries climbed the curved walls. The dome poured its hard column of daylight onto the table. But there was no instrument on the table this time, and no pen lying across the line, and that absence was the loudest thing in the room. The League had not dared set the pen in front of us again. The galleries were full, fuller than before. Every factor in the reach who could find a seat, because by now they had all read the maintenance ledger, and they had all come to see what Earth would do. Cellcast was waiting. He had not changed. The same narrow frame, the same pale mottled hide, the same tally stick folded in 3 fingers. But he held the tally stick differently now. 4 months before, he had gripped it like a weapon. Now he held it the way a man holds a thing he is no longer sure is his. Envoy Ren, he said. Earth Envoy returns to the reach. Earth's Envoy was asked, Ren said. Earth's Envoy came. You understand why? I understand why you wrote the letter you wrote, Ren said. I'd rather you said it, Speaker, in front of the galleries. The thing the letter wouldn't write. The room went very still. This was the moment Cellcast had been dreading from the day Pel Asen first ran the coordinates, and it had come, and there was no clause to hide behind, because the galleries had already read the ledger, and the speaker knew they had. To send for Earth and then refuse to say why, in front of 400 factors who already knew why, would have been a humiliation worse than the saying. Cellcast set the tally stick down on the table. It was the first time I had ever seen him let go of it. The lanes of the inner reach are failing, he said. His voice was steady. I will give him that. A lesser holder of paper would have let it shake. 11 hulls lost in 4 months. Distress calls that crawl. Beacons drifting off station. The charters bring claims I cannot answer, because the answer is the one thing the League cannot enter into its own record. He looked at Ren across the column of daylight. The beacons of the reach are maintained by Earth. They have been maintained by Earth for 6 years. When this body ordered Earth's hulls barred from the lanes, this body ordered the keepers off its own beacons, and the beacons have been failing ever since at the rate of unmaintained machines. The League's safety was Earth's work all along. I am saying it. Let it be entered into the record. The Speaker of Accounts says it, in front of the galleries. The lanes are lit because Earth lit them, and they are failing because the League sent Earth away. It cost him everything to say it. I watched it cost him. He had held the most paper in the reach for 30 years on the strength of one belief, that the League owned the lanes, and that owning the lanes was owning the dark, and that owning the dark was the only power that mattered. He said the words that unmade all of it, in front of the people who had elevated him for believing it, and he said them without dropping his eyes, and whatever else Orvu Cellcast was, in that moment he was not a coward. Now he said the League will make Earth an offer, a true membership, an equal ratio. Earth's lanes Earth's own, the League's adjudication shared, not imposed, and in return the resumption of the maintenance contracts so that the lanes are lit again and the hulls stop falling into the dark. He gestured, and a factor brought forward an instrument, a new one, thicker than the first, drafted in the 4 months since we left. It is a fair treaty, Envoy. I have made it as fair as the League knows how to make a thing. Earth has only to sign, and the lanes are saved, and the dark is closed again. A pen was set across the line, a new pen. And the whole chamber leaned in, because they thought this was the end of it, the fair offer made, the leverage spent, the deal struck, the lanes saved. They thought Earth had walked out 4 months ago to win exactly this, and that now the winning was here, and all that remained was for the Envoy to pick up the pen. Ren looked at the instrument. She looked at the pen. She looked at Cellcast, and there was no triumph in her face, only the old weariness, deeper now. No, she said. But the chamber did not let the no stand alone, not at first. And what happened in the minutes after it was the closest the second session came to coming apart. A factor rose in the third gallery before Selcast could speak. He was young, one of the readers, and he had not asked the speaker's leave, which in that chamber was its own small revolution. Envoy, he called down, the readers have a question, and will have it answered before the speaker buries it. If Earth declines the treaty, do the maintenance contracts resume or not? Say it plainly. 240 of our people sat in a robber's hold while this body refused to read the cause of a lost hull into its own record. We will not sit through another refusal. Do the lanes get lit or do they not? It was a fair question, and it was aimed past Wren at the speaker, and the whole chamber turned to see whether Selcast would try to take the floor back or let the envoy hold it. He let her hold it. He had learned that much. They resume, Wren said. Send the contracts out to bid the ordinary way, and Earth bids the ordinary way, and the lanes are lit again within the season. You don't need a treaty for that. You never did. The contracts were always there beneath the speaker's notice, doing the work no clause could do. The only thing the treaty adds is a line that says the League grants Earth its standing, and that line is false, and your speaker admitted it was false not 10 minutes ago in front of all of you. She looked up at the young reader. You don't need Earth to sign anything for your lanes to be safe. You need the League to put the contracts out and stop pretending the work beneath. Its notice was beneath its notice. That's all. Vote for that. You don't need us at your table to do it. The young reader sat down slowly, and I watched the thing happen in the galleries that Wren had been building toward for 4 months without ever once being in the room for it. The readers understood all at once that they did not need Earth, and they did not need the treaty, and they did not need the speaker's leave. They needed only to vote the maintenance contracts back out, which was a thing within their own power, a thing the League's own ordinary procedure already allowed, a thing no speaker could block because it was beneath a speaker's authority to block. Earth had not handed them a weapon against the League. Earth had shown them the weapon had been in their own hands the whole time, in the cost line ledger no one read, and that they had only to pick it up. Another factor rose, an older reader, and put the motion directly, that the League resume the lane maintenance contracts by ordinary bid at the close of session, without condition, without treaty, without any party's signature. And this time with Earth's envoy standing at the open doors, and the speaker's admission still hanging in the air, and 240 ransomed factors fresh in every gallery's memory, the count did not fail. It carried, not by 40 galleries, by the whole chamber. Selcast read the count himself in a steady voice and ruled the motion passed because there was nothing else he could do. To block it was to stand in front of all of them and insist the lane stay dark, and not even a speaker of accounts could hold the most paper after that. So the thing was decided before Wren ever reached the doors, and it was decided not by Earth and not by the speaker, but by the galleries themselves, voting the dull paper back into motion, which was exactly the outcome Wren had wanted, and exactly the outcome that left Earth with nothing in its hands. We had not won the lanes. We had not taken the markets. We had not signed for standing or been granted it. We had only declined twice and kept the lights on in between, and let the Reach discover that the power it had paid the League to hold had always been a maintenance contract away from anyone patient enough to bid on it. The young reader caught my eye. He did not thank me. Austin had been right, they never would, but he gave me a long look. The look a man gives a thing he has decided to be wary of for the rest of his life. And then he glanced down at the maintenance ledger open on his ledger pane, and I knew that the readers would be bidding on those contracts themselves next season, trying to learn the trick that was not a trick, and that some of them would stay the course, and some would give it up when they found there was nothing to it but 6 years of dull, honest work, and that the Reach would never again be a place where one body held the dark over everyone else's head. That was the whole of what we had come to do, and it was nearly done. Only the speaker had not finished. He still had the treaty on the table, and a speaker of accounts does not let a party leave with a pen lying untouched across a line until he has asked at least once why. The speaker had watched his own chamber vote the lanes lit without him, and now he made his last appeal, because the treaty was the one ground he had left under his feet, and a party that refuses the thing it appeared to want had no clause anywhere in the League's grammar. Envoy, Selcast said, and now his voice did move a little, because the one ground he had left, the fair offer, the thing he could give that Earth surely wanted, had just gone soft beneath him as well. The chamber has voted the contracts back out. The lanes will be lit. You have what you came for. But the treaty stands, and the treaty is fair. I have heard your refusal of the first instrument, and I have understood it, and I have written a second that answers every objection. Equal ratio. Your lane's your own. Shared adjudication. The dark closed by clause as well as by contract. What in it does Earth still decline? The signature, Ren said. The terms are fair. The terms are fair, Ren agreed. I have no quarrel with the terms. I have a quarrel with the pen. She did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. Speaker, you have just entered into the record that the lanes are lit because Earth lit them. That the safety of the reach is Earth's work. That the League sent the keepers away and the dark came back. You said it in front of the galleries, and it's true, and it's the truest thing said in this chamber in 300 years. And now you ask Earth to sign a treaty by which the League grants Earth the standing to do the work Earth has already been doing for 6 years without the League's grant. Do you see it? To sign your fair treaty is to agree that Earth's place in the reach is a gift of the League. It isn't. The galleries just heard you say it isn't. If I pick up that pen, I unsay it for you. She stood. She had stood the same way 4 months ago, gathering nothing. And the chamber recognized the motion now, and a sound went through the galleries that was not panic exactly, but something near it. The sound of 400 factors realizing that the woman was going to walk out a second time, and that this time there was no schedule of consequence to read at her back, because the consequence had already happened, and it had happened to the League. Then what does Earth want? Selcast said. It was the first time in 300 years that a speaker of accounts had asked a party what it wanted, instead of telling it what it would receive. You walked out rather than sign the collar. You walk out rather than sign the equal treaty. You hold the lanes and you light them for nothing, and you ask for nothing, and now you decline even the fair offer. What does Earth want, Envoy? Say it plainly so the galleries hear it, since you are so fond of the record. Ren was quiet for a moment. Then she gave him the plainest answer she had, and it was the only speech-shaped thing she said in either session, and it was 4 sentences long. Earth wants nothing the League can grant, she said. Earth will keep the lanes lit because lit lanes are good and dark lanes are not, and we'd have kept them lit whether you sent for us or not. Send your maintenance contracts the ordinary way, to the lowest bidder, the way you always did, and Earth will bid the way it always has, and the lanes will be safe again by the ordinary working of dull paper no speaker. Reads. But there will be no treaty because a treaty would say the League gives Earth its standing, and the galleries have heard you admit the League does not. She turned to go. And then she stopped and she turned back, and she did the only thing in either session that I would call cruel, except that it was not cruelty. It was the last necessary lesson, delivered without heat. You read me a schedule of consequence 4 months ago, Speaker, she said. Closed lanes, closed markets, withdrawn escorts, voided claims. You read it to teach me that the dark was Earth's to fear. I'll read you a schedule now, and then I'll go. Upon Earth's second refusal, the following take effect at the close of session. 1. The lanes stay lit because Earth keeps them lit. 2. The markets stay open because Earth never needed them. 3. The charters keep moving because Earth never barred them. 4. And every factor in this chamber goes home, knowing that the safety they pay the League to provide is provided by the people the League cast into the dark and provided for free, and that the League's whole power was holding paper on a thing it neither built nor maintained nor understood. She let it settle, the way the white-hided factor had let the schedule of consequence settle 4 months before. That is the schedule of Earth's consequence. The League's hands are clean. Strike it from the record if you like. Then go and live in it. She walked, I walked with her. And this time the doors were already open. Selcast had ordered them open before the session began, a courtesy, a sign of how much had changed, and so there was nothing for him to grant or withhold. We walked toward open doors, through the column of daylight, past the table where the fair treaty lay with its pen across the line, untouched, and past the galleries where 400 factors sat with the schedule of Earth's consequence still hanging in the air, and not one of them spoke, because there was nothing in the League's grammar to say. Pelisson was at the door. He had risen from his gallery and come down to the floor, the only factor to leave his seat, and he stood by the open doors as we reached them, his clouded eyes on Ren. They will never forgive you for this, he said quietly. Not the collar. They'd have forgiven the collar. A people who takes the collar is a people they understand. But a people who could close the dark on them and chooses to keep it open, asking nothing, that they will fear for as long as the Reach remembers. You have made Earth the thing every charter in the Reach is afraid of. The patient one. The one that doesn't want anything. I know, Ren said. It's better than the collar, is it? It's better for the next world he sets the pen in front of, she said. There won't be a next world, Austin. That's the whole of it. The speaker can't read a schedule of consequence to anyone ever again because the galleries have heard that the dark was always his to lose, not theirs. 41 people signed the collar because the dark was worse. Earth has shown them the dark was the League's the whole time. That's done now. It can't be undone. The League will hold its paper, and the lanes will stay lit, and no envoy will ever again sit at that table and believe that refusing means the dark. That's what we wanted. We didn't want anything for Earth. We wanted to take the pen's power away, and we have. We went out into the daylight. The door stayed open behind us, and the hard white sun off the apron washed the chamber pale, and 400 factors sat in the brightness with 2 pens lying untouched across 2 signature lines, 4 months apart, in the column of light from the glass dome. It happened the way she said it would, by the ordinary working of dull paper. The League put the maintenance contracts back out to bid through the usual procurement clerks, the way it had for 200 years, as janitor worked beneath a chartered firm's notice. Earth bid the way Earth always had, lowest, and won them the way Earth always had, lane by lane, beacon by beacon. There was no treaty, there was no ceremony, there was no instrument with a pen across the line. There was only a column of cost line awards in the maintenance ledger that no speaker read, and the slow return of Earth's tenders to the lanes, and the slow recertification of firmware on beacon after beacon, until the handshakes ran clean again, and the distress calls relayed in minutes, instead of days, and the hulls stopped falling into the dark. By the end of the next year, the lanes of the inner reach were the safest they had been in their history, and they were safe because Earth maintained them, and every factor in the reach knew it, and the knowing sat in the chamber like a permanent witness no clause could strike. The League went on holding its paper. It adjudicated its disputes and chartered its markets and collected its tolls. But it never again read a schedule of consequence to a new party, because the galleries remembered the day a speaker of accounts admitted, in front of all of them, that the safety the League sold belonged to the people the League cast out. After that, the schedule was a dead weapon. You cannot threaten a world with the dark when the whole reach has watched the dark turn out to be yours. Wren did not go back. There was no reason to. The thing she went to do had been done at the door, with 4 sentences and a walk, and the rest was the slow, ordinary working of contracts that did not need an envoy. She served 2 more years, and then she gave the post to someone younger and went home. And I went with her, and we did not speak much of the reach, because there was not much to say about a thing that had ended so quietly. But Pelosson wrote, once a year, on League letterhead, in a hand grown shakier each time. He told us small things, which charters were prospering, which factors had died, which young holders had begun, carefully, to talk about whether the League ought to build something again instead of only holding paper on what others built. In his last letter, the year before he died, the old factor wrote a line I have kept. The speaker still has the 2 pens, he wrote. He keeps them on the table, across the 2 old signature lines on the 2 instruments Earth never signed. He has them brought out for every new party that comes to the reach now. He shows them the 2 untouched pens before any business begins. The factors say he does it to remember his humiliation. I think he does it for a better reason than that. I think he shows the pen so that the new party understands before a word is spoken that in this chamber a signature is a thing that can be declined, and that the dark is not the League's to give. He turned your gesture into the first lesson the reach teaches, the patient world, the one that wanted nothing. He cannot say your name in the chamber, the galleries would not bear it, but he keeps your pens on the table, and that is the nearest a speaker of accounts will ever come to gratitude. There was a postscript to that letter, in a smaller, steadier hand than the rest, as though Asen had set it down on a different day. A 42nd world came to the reach this season, he wrote. A young people, off the spinward lanes, with little paper and less standing, and the new speaker brought out your 2 pens and showed them the untouched lines before any instrument was opened. I do not know what the young envoy understood from it, but she did not sign that day. She asked for time, and she went away to read the maintenance ledger, the cost line paper no speaker reads, and I am told she has begun, very quietly, to bid on the dull contracts no chartered firm will touch. I thought you would want to know that the lesson held. There is a 42nd world now, and it had somewhere to look. I read that postscript to Wren first, before the rest, and she opened her eyes at it and looked out at the dark a long while. And I will not pretend I knew everything that was in her face, except that the weariness in it had eased a fraction, the way a long-carried weight eases when you finally set down the corner of it that mattered most. Then I read her the rest of the letter on her porch, in the last good autumn of her life. She listened with her eyes closed, the way she had slept on the cutter 20 years before, and when I finished she was quiet for a long time. 41 charters, she said at last. 41 people signed the collar because the dark was worse, and they were right, and there was no shame in it. I think about them still. I never wanted to beat the League, Tomas. The League isn't worth beating. I wanted the 42nd world to have somewhere to look when the pen came across the line. That's all. Somewhere to look, and one true thing to know, And the one true thing, I said, that you can decline, she said. That the dark they threaten you with is theirs more often than yours if you've done the dull work long enough to know it. That a signature is the moment you agree a thing said about you is true, and that no schedule of consequence, however thorough, can make you pick up the pen. We didn't take anything from the league, Tomas. We left everything on the table, the collar, the markets, the standing, the fair treaty, all of it. We left it lying there in the daylight, and we walked out twice with nothing in our hands. And it turned out that walking out with nothing in your hands, when they have built the whole room to make you sign, is the loudest thing a person can do. She did not say it like a victory. She never said anything like a victory. She said it the way an old envoy says the one thing she is sure of, after 30 years of difficult rooms, in the plain flat voice of someone who has stopped being impressed by power and never once was impressed by herself. The 2 pens are still on that table, I am told. A new speaker holds the most paper now, and a new generation of factors fills the galleries. And somewhere out in the dark, the beacons of the inner reach run clean and on time, maintained by people from a world the League once read a schedule of consequence to in the hard daylight under the glass dome, with a pen lying ready across the line. They set the pen in front of you to teach you that refusing means the dark. We left it on the table and walked out into the sun and let them learn whose dark it was, had no schedule of consequence, however thorough, can make you pick up the pen. We didn't take anything from the League, Tomas. We left everything on the table, the collar, the mar.